The challenge is, and this is something I always say, creating new partnerships requires engaging working with people where we may not agree on everything. We can't address climate change unless we protect what we already have. The rest of the world talks about the transition from fossil fuels to clean energy. In Africa, something like 600 million people still don't have access to reliable energy. One of my favorite quotes is from Eleanor Roosevelt, "The way to begin is to begin." And so I hope the book gives people a place to start, place to begin.
I want to welcome everyone back to the Green Hour. We're live at the Concordia Annual Summit during Climate Week, New York City. We're sitting with Michael Sheldrick, co-founder of Global Citizen. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I think first things first, could you talk about what Global Citizen is, and then maybe talk about the founding of the organization?
So Global Citizen is a movement of 12.5 million citizens around the world, predominantly under the age of 24, so it's very youthful. And the core of our mission, the true north, if you like, is a world without extreme poverty. And global citizens, they come from everywhere. Here in the US, in Europe, Nigeria. Last year, about a quarter of all the actions taken on the Global Citizen platform. We have this great app where people take action, they learn about the issues. More than a quarter came from the continent of Africa. This year, more than 40% have come from Brazil. So we're very global. Of course, people in this city and this week of all weeks know us for our pop and policy approach because, of course, we have the Global Citizen Festival, which is taking place with the likes of Shakira, Cardi B. But since we founded the organization a decade and a half ago, we've mobilized something like more than 40 million citizen actions. That's tweets, petitions, volunteering, picking up trash. Just last week, we had people down at the beach on Long Island picking up tons of trash. And we estimate that something like 1 billion life-saving interventions have been delivered as a result. So that's the power of our partnership and this movement. How we got started, I was a student advocate in Australia, me and the other founders. First, we started with charity, raising dollars here and there, quiz nights, movie nights, but quickly realized, look, no amount of charity gala night dinners are going to raise the billions needed to end extreme poverty. So the question we were grappling with as founders was, how do we mobilize citizens at scale to engage in these issues? And at the time, we thought social media apps was a way to go. So we developed an app. The only challenge was no one was downloading it. So that's where we came up with this idea. It was actually a gentleman in California, Ryan Gore, who suggested it to us. But you download the app, you take action and you earn points, and you can trade in those points to earn great tickets and rewards, including to the Global Citizen Festival. So we've changed a lot over the years, but that's where we got started. And I just see it as a privilege because I've been able to work with some incredible advocates and leaders around the world.
So I just saw last week, I think it was last week, you're in Singapore, right? And you were, I guess,
That's
launching the event
right.
in Singapore.
That's
So
right.
can you talk about that and what that event was?
Well, so obviously we're at a moment in time where the world is in flux, right? And one of the biggest challenges this year, you ask people working on the effort to end extreme poverty, is the fact that foreign aid budgets have been stripped away. Not just here in the US, but around the world. You see in Europe that governments are under pressure to fulfill new NATO commitments to dedicate 5% of their gross national product to military and defense. And so I think it was the UK who explicitly said that because of this, they have to slash the aid budget, which, is a very small fraction of government aid. And it does a world of difference in terms of the impact it has. But from our standpoint, we're interested in being solution orientated. Where are the new partnerships? Where are the new opportunities? Where are the new geographies? And so last week, Global Citizen had our first ever event in Southeast Asia with some incredible artists in Singapore. We had family offices there. We partnered with a foundation called TPC and Foundation Number 17. And it was all about how can we drive philanthropy? How can we drive impact investing to achieve our goals, whether that's addressing illegal deforestation in tropical rainforests, scaling energy access, or providing education for all. It won't replace foreign aid in exactly the same way, but there's different ways to mobilize this. And I think in Asia, 90% of the companies are privately run. So if you can influence the families that run it, then maybe we could have a world of impact. So it was very enriching. It was very fulfilling. And right now we're just seeing new tremendous partnerships around the world. We're working with Bancos do Brazil, one of Brazil's most sustainable banks, to bring the festival and the movement there in November ahead of COP30. And we've also got some exciting partnerships taking place in the Middle East and others. So stay tuned for that. We don't rest on our laurels, and I'm always a glass half full type of person. And so the partnerships are out there if you're willing to meet people. The challenge is, and this is something I always say, creating new partnerships requires engaging, working with people where we may not agree on everything, right? And that's okay. And that's what I keep reminding people, especially this week.
The note that I have down is global citizens focus areas. First is energy access for 1 million people in Africa. Secondly, protect 30 million hectares of the Amazon. And third, education for 30,000 children globally.
Yeah.
What's the, I would say, process to tackling those?
Yeah. So in the lead up to September, we've had these 3 goals. So if I take the last one you mentioned around education, we're so excited that we've launched this partnership with FIFA. Global Citizens known for the power of music and using that to unite people. So it makes sense that we're going to work with one of the biggest sport brands in the world ahead of the FIFA World Cup, which is being co-hosted by the US, Mexico, and Canada next year. Aside from Global Citizen actually producing the first ever halftime show of a FIFA World Cup, so think of it like the Super Bowl, we will also be launching this fund. And our goal is to mobilize $100 million between now and July next year, including from ticket sales, a portion, the weekend, the artist, he's been dedicating a percentage of his ticket sales.
Wow.
FIFA will do the same. We're partnering with Shift4 on Roundup donations, but also businesses and philanthropy. So our goal is by the end of this week to mobilize 30 million. We're almost there. If anyone wants to give us a few more commitments, that will get us over the line. The second big priority is this idea of protecting the Amazon. You know, we think of the Amazon as being in one corner of the world, but it really is the lungs of the earth. We can't address climate change unless we protect what we already have. And I've been fortunate to be able to go to the Amazon multiple times over the last few years. And it's incredible. You meet these incredibly gifted and innovative indigenous entrepreneurs. They have the solution, but they need the investment. So we've been going to the multi-development banks, philanthropists. We have a great partnership with Reward, for instance, to mobilize businesses and philanthropy, not as charity, but to invest in these entrepreneurs so they have a sustainable livelihood. So it means that there isn't an incentive to burn the Amazon, to raise cattle, or to plant soybeans. And lastly, in terms of scaling up energy access in the continent, you know, this is something, you know, when we asked our global citizens across the continent, one of the things which they keep saying is, we can't do any of these things without access to energy. The rest of the world talks about the transition from fossil fuels to clean energy. In Africa, something like 600 million people still don't have access to reliable energy. And so we've partnered with the European Union and the government of South Africa ahead of their G20 conference this year. And what we're working with is how can we make it viable for businesses to invest and scale in energy? And I'm really excited that we have 3, possibly 4 big announcements this week that we believe will reach at least 1 million new people with access to energy over the coming years. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it. So, I mean, it sounds like when you co-founded Global Citizen, it was an idea and then it became this large impact, right? And then you wrote this book. I think the paperback copy is coming out fairly soon. But
From ideas to impact.
From ideas to impact, a playbook for influencing and implementing change in a divided world. Could you talk about this book? What led you to write it?
You know, I was always grateful when we started Global Citizen. You know, we were these young advocates and we didn't have much to our name. We didn't have sponsorship. We didn't have access to all of the most powerful people in the industry. But there was a couple of people who listened to our ideas and they believed in the power of our ideas. So I've always felt it important to give back. If someone reaches out to me on Instagram or LinkedIn, I try and respond. It may not be instantly, but you never know where the next big idea is going to come from. And the last few years, I found a lot of people reaching out to me saying, we love what you've done with Global Citizen. How can we apply the lessons you've learned to the issues we're tackling, whether it's in their local communities, sometimes it's in their university campuses, sometimes it's in their nations or even at a global level. But whatever it is, they've said, what are the lessons? And so I kind of went out, not just from my experience, but many of the incredible leaders who I've been fortunate enough to work with, interviewed them, and I distilled it into this 8-point playbook called From Ideas to Impact, a playbook for influence and change in a divided world. And really, I mean, I'm not attempting to, I confess, I'm not attempting to answer every single question out there, but my thing is right now, the research all shows if you can give people a place to start, and if they can see their actions have a difference, that is one of the best ways to motivate a bias for action. And I think one of the best things we can do right now to push back on the tide of despair and apathy, the notion that our actions can't make a difference, is to give people a place to start. And so one of my favorite quotes is from Eleanor Roosevelt: "The way to begin is to begin." And so I hope the book gives people a place to start, place to begin. And, is relatable. It's got advocates from small communities, schools around the world making an impact. So, I've been thrilled by the response. And in the paperback edition coming out, I've got a brand new chapter with some incredible stories. So hopefully people will be inspired by that.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, what I saw in practice was I reached out to you on Instagram, and it was like in a matter of 5 minutes, you responded that you were interested, and now we're here today. So I really thank you for that. But the note that I do have down is, I mean, you talk about just start, right? If you have an idea, just start. But in the book, you talk about an implementation crisis that's currently underway. What does that mean? And why is that so urgent?
So I think right now, I mean, I'm not saying anything that many people don't know, that there is a huge gap in expectations between the reality and what people want or desire. Now, the thing that is incredible is, despite that expectation gap, people, and there's surveys out here, the Open Society Barometer, Global Nation, which is this fantastic think tank, does a report every year. And it shows, despite that, large numbers of people still believe in cooperation. They still believe in solidarity. There's a new report out which showed something like 3/4 of people on the whole understand around the world that we have to work together on the issues facing us today. But the challenge is the longer it takes for people to see that expectation gap close, people are going to begin to lose faith, right? And so my point is, in the book, I talk about policy entrepreneurship, the dynamic innovators, right? Whether in government or outside government, whether it's in business, whether it's running a small business, whether it's running an NGO, whether it's being a youth leader, and how we can all innovate and drive policy. And I talk a lot in the book around leveraging the strengths of others. From a global citizen standpoint, we leverage the power of culture. Why? Because culture shapes stories. Stories shape leaders. Leaders shape policy, and policy shift the system. And that's true at the local, national, or global level. And so the book is really very practical playbook on how everyone can do that. And, I genuinely believe action is the antidote to apathy and despair. And one of the things I say that keeps me going is we just have to have a little bit of faith in our fellow human beings. One of my favorite reports is the Global Happiness Report. And every year it shows these stats where they ask people, if a person in front of you dropped their wallet, would you pick up the wallet and return it to them? Most people answer that question, yes, I would do that, right? Yeah, we're good people. But it's interesting, when people are then asked, if you dropped your wallet, do you believe your neighbor would return it? They say no.
Disproportionate.
I know.
Probably.
Well, we're actually less cynical. Well, we're actually more cynical about humanity and the nature of humanity than is the reality. And so that's where I think telling stories, if you're doing good, sharing that's probably one of the best things that we can do to turn the page on this sea of despair we see right now.
So one other question I have, could you share a favorite example that captures, the spirit of the book?
I've got many examples in there. I've got coal communities in Australia, trade unionists and coal workers sitting down with environmental activists who they probably wanted to punch before this, who were picketing them and making common cause. And the climate activists realizing and saying, look, These people aren't anti their agenda, but they just care about their home. And if you just shut down a coal plant or a coal mine without any recourse as to what happens to the community, this is someone's home. And they actually found out, and I think I'd cite this example in the book as a best practice example, but I actually think this is one of the best examples of a so-called just transition. And it was led by people who were adversaries, who were foes, and they came together and they said, you know what, let's advocate together. And the government ended up responding to that. They brought one of the largest battery investments in the Southern Hemisphere. Tesla's come in and invested now in a battery refinance committee. But basically, they've revitalized the whole town. And it's one of these examples of where the community is leading the process. And something that one of the trade union leaders said to me, he said, it worked because government didn't lead the process. Often government comes in and tells you what the outcome's going to be. It was community. We decided the outcomes. It was our table, and we invited government along with industry and others to our table, and we led it. And so I love that example because it's a form of community advocacy. And I've heard people from across America and around the world say, well, maybe we could use this as a blueprint. But one of the things that, whether it was the stories in that, or there's other stories of, small island nations, there's some incredible young woman who I got the opportunity to work with in South Africa. One of the things that was common amongst all of them that they all said, and you've heard me say this already, but it was something which I want to drive home, was they said, creating change requires working with people you don't like or agree with. And that was the common denominator across all the stories.
Yeah, I think in today's, political landscape, you have people on both sides. And honestly, if we could all work together to find solutions, I mean, we're all going to be better because of it.
And I get it. And often what people say to me is there's this fear, people tend to identify in tribes, right?
Yeah.
And they say it's the fear from being called out often by their own tribe. If I'm seen to be working with this, am I going to be labeled a traitor or, betraying my cause? And so I think that's where, someone said to me the other day that, you could meet with someone, agree on 100 things, and yet the thing that you will walk away stewing on is the one thing you disagreed with. And that doesn't define the person. And so I think we have to get back to that. The good news is I see all, whether it's in this country or around the world, and the response to the book, the stories I've been getting, I encourage people to share because I run this Substack and I share it, is actually showing that actually people are doing beneath the radar, may not get the headlines, but in many cases, people are doing this. They're working together.
So, I mean, how does that feel when you read these stories of people actually taking what you wrote in the book and actually implementing that in their own lives?
It's refreshing. I think I always try and, the book's for everyone. It's not just for young people. But one email I got afterwards was from this mother, and she brought her 18-year-old son to her, said, he's generally apathetic. And I see that. I think amongst all generations, but especially young people, the question of whether our actions can make a difference or is it too late, you really feel this. But, the feedback from him afterwards, okay, well, let's do something. There are things we can affect. For me, it's a validation. That's what the book set out to do. But it's also reassuring because I didn't know whether it was going to resonate or not, which is part of the reason I then wrote this additional chapter, because I had all these great stories and content. And I keep stressing it is not a book around global citizen. I touched briefly on my story, but in many cases, it's full of stories from around the world.
So final question I'll ask, where can people get the book? And tell us again when the paperback copy is set to release.
So the book is available. You can get it on Amazon. And it's also available on Audible as well. And if you like listen to it and maybe at 1.6 speed, that's what I've been told, you can listen to it in under 4 hours. So if you have a moderately long drive, you can listen to it. It's also available at all good bookstores, which I put on my website at michaelsheldrick.com/book. And the paperback copy will be out in early November, but you can pre-order it now on Amazon and other places. And it has some incredible stories, entrepreneurs from the Amazon, from the UK and other places. So I'm really excited for people to listen to it. And of course, people can subscribe to my Substack, my newsletter, follow me on Instagram. I'm at Mick Sheldrick, or on LinkedIn. Happy to help where I can, happy to support, give advice, or at least point you in the direction of someone who might be able to support.
All right. Well, perfect read going into COP30.
Exactly.
But thank you so much, Michael, for joining
Thank
us
you.
today.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.